Okay, we're live here, and I'm just gonna wait for the YouTube feed to catch up. Just give this 1 second now. I'm gonna put this over here. Oh, there we go. Perfect. Yeah. So, for those watching, essentially the point of this stream is Daniel and I are just going to investigate essentially what Paul was saying about the gospel versus what Muhammad was saying about the gospel, and then we're going to essentially give kind of our 2 cents on that in terms of who we believe is telling the truth.
Mhm.
Um, so yeah, welcome Daniel. So I have Daniel today for anyone who doesn't know from Jesus Conversation. I recommend you guys go to his channel, subscribe, check out his content. Daniel has fantastic videos as far as apologetics is concerned, Bible study, just anything Bible related, Christianity related. It's a great resource to make use of. So yeah, welcome to the stream, Daniel.
Thanks, Adam. Glad to be here.
Okay, perfect. So, the gospel. Um, this is quite an interesting stream. I'm gonna first give my 2 cents kind of on this, and then we'll go into maybe some verses, Quranic verses, as well as Bible verses in a little bit. But basically, as far as Muhammad is concerned and Paul is concerned, the question kind of becomes more so, whose word are you going to take on this, right? Who do we
Mhm.
believe is more kind of trustworthy as far as what they're telling us about the gospel is concerned? I think from a historian standpoint, if you're going to act like a historian and try and investigate this as a historian, the answer is quite obvious. It's obviously going to be Paul. Uh, Simply due to the fact, and I know a lot of Muslims today, they hate Paul because of the fact that he essentially contradicts pretty much everything that Muhammad was saying about Christ, as well as the apostles of Jesus himself. But essentially, Paul, as we know, he converted, and this is the kind of thing I try and get Muslims to see. Paul converted within 3 years of the crucifixion, so
Yeah.
that's very close proximity to the actual event itself. And then
Mhm.
on top of that, we know as well, and this is as well accepted within academia, that Paul was in contact with the disciples themselves, the direct disciples of Christ. Now, according to the Quran, those direct disciples of Christ are Muslim. Um,
Mhm.
if I'm not mistaken, I think in the Quran, we can check this in a minute, but if I'm not mistaken, there's a verse in the Quran where it even numbers them to the same number of 12 apostles. It doesn't
Mhm.
it doesn't name them, but it says there was 12 of them. So
Yeah.
obviously this tradition still continued even into Islam, okay, that there was 12.
Mhm.
Um, However, it identifies them as Muslim, but we know from the biblical data, and this is accepted as well within academia, because even someone like Bart Ehrman acknowledges this, that those disciples actually came to the belief that Jesus was God and started to worship him. So that would negate any avenue to call them a Muslim, because according to Bart Ehrman, they fell straight into shirk.
Mhm.
Okay,
Yeah. Yeah.
but the Quran denies that. Obviously, the Quran says no, they were just Muslim. But this is kind of a common pattern with the Quran as we've been going through these streams, is that the Quran makes claims, but it can't back up any of its claims with historical evidence. Rather, the historical evidence refutes it. Um, but yeah, I'll just stop there for a moment. So, in summary, um, Paul was, as close as possible to the earliest followers of Jesus. He knew them, he walked with them, he spoke with them, he had an actual encounter with Christ, the resurrected Christ. Muhammad then comes along 500-600 years later with something entirely contrary to everything that came before, and then he's trying to convince us and tell us that what he has is correct, even though in the Quran it doesn't even define what the good news is, because that is what gospel means. It means good news. So what's good about it? Like,
Mhm.
please elaborate, Muhammad, but yet no mentioning of it whatsoever in the Quran. Yeah, go ahead, Daniel.
Yeah. I think you covered it very succinctly, the entire summary of Paul. Just to add to that, what I would say is, for the critics of the Christian faith as it is practiced today, as the gospel is defined, the death, burial, and resurrection of Jesus that brings salvation to mankind without any merit on the part of mankind. So that thing is not just propagated by Paul alone. There are letters from Peter, letters from James, the half brother of Jesus. Then there are letters from Jude, that is just in the New Testament. other than that, then you have the early writings of the church fathers, and even if they contradict each other on the finer points which are irrelevant to the central faith, but when you go back and look, none of these writings, starting from Paul and all the people I mentioned and all the church fathers, none of them have ever contradicted on the fact that Christ died for our sins, and again he rose again for our salvation. So that is the central uh, foundation of Christianity. There is no debate about it. There is no contradiction about it. That's where we stand. So for Muhammad to come many centuries later and assert that God does not have a son, or that you have to do works to attain salvation, or that Jesus did not die on the cross, that is absurd. It cannot be. If you're really a person who can think, who has a brain, you cannot take that as any evidence. It's just rumblings of somebody who doesn't understand what he was talking against. It is possible that the people that he heard were like Nestorians or whatever it is, but therein lies the issue. The Quran condemns the Christian faith altogether, not a certain heretical sect of people. uh, I think yeah, we don't want to go that route right now, but that's where it stands. So it's not a sole voice of Paul alone. Paul is supported by all the disciples and apostles of Jesus, and also the early fathers. So if I have to choose who is well founded in his message, I have to choose Paul, not Muhammad.
Yeah, and the other thing is that it's a definitional issue as well, because as I said, in the Quran, it never tells you what the gospel is. It just says a book
Mhm.
containing light and guidance. Like
Yeah.
that's the limit of the definition, but that's not clear. That doesn't tell me what the good news is. What
Mhm.
what guidance? What light? What on earth are you talking about? Doesn't really make sense. Whereas, as you pointed out, Daniel, in the first century and the second century, all the documentation that we have as far as the good news is concerned is it's all unanimous, right?
Mhm.
It's that Christ came to die for the sins of the world. He overcomes death on the cross through his resurrection, and then by being resurrected, right, he's exalted to the right hand of the Father, acts as the intermediary, if you will, between man and God, and will come back on the day of judgment, right, to judge the living and the dead, to decide who gets into heaven and who doesn't. And he gives us the right to be children of God through himself, through his sacrifice, right? That's an entitlement we have through being made a new creature in Christ. And this is what constitutes the gospel. It's not more complex or less complex than that. But in the Quran, as I said, there's literally no definition given at all as to what constitutes the gospel. It's just, as I said, a book that contains guidance and light. But what does that even mean? Right? Well, like, what on earth, in Muhammad's eyes, was the gospel? What was the good news? What was it that Jesus brought with him as far as his message is concerned?
Mhm.
Um, but as I said, whenever I ask Muslims this, they don't know. They don't have an
Yeah.
answer. They'll just say something like, "Well, we assume this is kind of the best approximation of what they think the gospel would have been. We assume essentially what it was it was exactly the same what every other prophet came with before, with maybe one or two new teachings." But like, how that's what's good news about that? That's the same cyclical, recycled message over and over again. There's nothing new about that. There's nothing good about that. It's the same thing. It's the it should have been called, if that's your paradigm, it should be called the same redundant news, because
Mhm.
according in the Islamic paradigm, the prophets just bring the same message over and over again. One
Yeah.
prophet comes, like Moses. He brings to them the message of the one true God, Allah, and you need to worship Him and turn from idolatry. Then, when Moses dies, another prophet comes 100 years later, does exactly the same thing, maybe adds one or two minor new things, but that's it.
Mhm.
That's the pattern in Islam. It's overly simplified. Again, that's why there's a total disconnect between, for example, what we have in the Tanakh and the New Testament versus what the Quran says about these revelations, and what the Quran says the Prophet said. Uh, but yeah, it's a fundamental difference. But it's for Muslims to come on and to prove to us, right, why, for example, Muhammad's message for them is more reliable than Paul's. Because again, I think the argument that Hamza ran from, and we looked at it briefly last week, Daniel, where
Mhm.
Avery asked him, "Okay, if you're saying you don't trust Paul because Paul wasn't in line with the teachings of the apostles, how can you prove that Muhammad was?"
Mhm.
It's like there
Yeah.
you go. It's like instant checkmate, right? I'll leave it there for now, Daniel. Yeah? Is there anything you'd like to add, or any verse you'd like to go to?
Yeah, so I just picked up. You said that um, the idea of good news within Islam is that it is a light and a guidance.
Yeah.
I have to just pick on the bones there. Salvation and guidance are not exactly the same. Salvation comes from the Greek word. If I go with the Greek, soteria means deliverance. The idea is that just for example, if someone has fallen into the well, and I come there and I say, okay, I'm going to give you a light and a guidance how to come out, that I have not delivered them. Deliverance would be for me to bring a rope and bring him out. So that is the idea of salvation that is being described within the scriptures. So when it says, Christ, his name is Yeshua, again, going from the Hebrew, coming from the construct of Ye, standing for Yehovah, and Shua means again salvation, deliverance. So the Lord is salvation, or the Lord delivers. So the idea that he's guiding or bringing a light is not in line with the work that Jesus did. How can I again amplify this? When John chapter 14, when the disciples asked Jesus, we don't know where you're going, he said, I'm going to the Father. But he says, they say, we don't know where you're going and the way. He did not tell them, I'm going to show you the way to the Father. He could have just said that. He said, I am the way. Means when you come to him, you come to the Father, because he and the Father are one. So the idea that good news is a light and a guidance does not line up, because that is not technically what Jesus did. The scripture is very clear. Through his death and resurrection, he brought people life and salvation. So just to clarify on that, I just wanted to say that. Also, I would like to note here that Allah is never called the way. He may be called the way. He's actually on the way. In one of the
Right.
streams, we saw it. He is technically not the way. He may, you may assume that he will show you the way, but there is a difference between a guru or a master that tells you, shows you something, versus somebody who is the end goal, one who actually does it for you. And that's what Jesus is. He's the savior of the world. That's what the scripture says.
Yeah. Absolutely. So this is the verse from the Quran that says that essentially the gospel was given to Jesus, and that it contained the guidance and light and confirming what was revealed in the Torah. I'm just interested to see what the tafsirs have to say about this, because I'm trying to understand how does someone like Ibn Kathir make sense of this? Now we might have to go to the other website, because this is the
Mhm.
abridged version. The light that removes the doubts and so on. Okay. Meaning he adhered to the accepted views that clarify the truth, where the children of Israel differed. Okay. The Injeel. Oh, okay. So the scholars say that the Injeel abrogated some of the rulings of the Torah. Okay.
Mhm.
Um, we made the Injeel guidance and okay. Okay. So that he judges the people of the Injeel by it in their time. Okay. Oh, here we go. Allah is the real such of the rebellious, meaning the rebellious and disobedient of Allah prefer false and abandon truth. We mentioned before that it was revealed about the Christians, and this is evident from the next context of the ayah. Okay, so that's Ibn Kathir. Let's see what this guy has to say. I'm just trying to see if they actually comment on the Injil, because in chapter 2, verse 89, it says that the Quran actually affirms the Injil and the Torah that's there in Medina amidst the Christians and the Jews of that time.
Mhm.
Uh, okay, pointing that the okay, exists in the Torah too. Okay, no, it doesn't mention anything. What about this guy? Wow, I think there's somewhat ironically, like when you go through the tafsirs, I think the reason they say little to nothing about it is because guess what, Daniel? I don't think they know themselves.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
Oh wait, there's someone here, Daniel.
Yeah.
Hello,
Yeah, hello guys. Hello.
are
Hi.
you Muslim?
Yeah, I'm Muslim. I don't think Paul can be like a true apostle.
Okay, what constitutes a true apostle then?
Well, I think he would have to teach like a logical doctrine. I don't think the Trinity is logical at all.
And what makes you think that?
Well, I just have to ask, like, first of all, what type of Trinity do you guys hold to?
I would just say, or like Orthodox Trinitarianism. But my question to you is like, what for you is illogical about it, and then how do you then say, for example, that what Muhammad introduced was logical in light of that?
Okay, well, of course, Tawhid I find is the more logical doctrine. But I'd say, well, when it comes to the counting method, right? How come we count one God instead of three? That's my question, really.
No, that's a good question. That's a good question. So the way it's expressed through Scripture is that there's a distinction between nature or being, and then person. So when we refer to the being of God, or his essence, his nature, if you will, as being divine, that divine essence or nature is the same nature that the Father, the Son, and the Spirit possess. So as persons, okay, you have three persons, okay, but as God, you have one divine nature that all three have, thereby making one God by essence. So that's kind of the, let's say, the proto-Trinitarian sort of, or sorry, the Orthodox Trinitarian sort of position on that.
Are you familiar with Leibniz's law of identity?
Which one?
Leibniz's law of identity.
Let me try and look this up. I haven't heard of this one before. Unless you want to try and go through it there, explain it.
Yeah, sure, I can explain it. It's quite simple. It tells you if X and Y share all the same properties, then like X and Y are the same exact thing. They're not two different beings, right? So like imagine Clark Kent and Superman. I'm not gonna say Clark Kent is a different person than Superman. I'd say that those are the same two people. And this is gonna apply to the Trinity, right? So if you claim that Jesus and the Father and the Holy Spirit all share the same essence and they have no different properties, then you're not gonna count three distinct beings. It's either they're three gods, or there is no true distinction, right?
No,
So
the
you either count
distinction.
one.
No. The
Yeah, go ahead.
distinction is in, yeah, the distinction is in what we call the hypostases. So if you're familiar with like early church, what's it called, taught on this, because this was something that was fleshed out in the early church. They made a separation or a distinction between the ousia, which is the essence of God, the divine nature of God, and then the three hypostases, right, who all have that same essence or nature, right? This was what all these councils were trying to flesh out in language, okay? It was something they knew and they understood from revelation, from scripture, but then they had to find a way to formulate it through rhetoric. So the best understanding they could come to, based on what the scriptures tell us, is that you have, as I said, one ousia, but then you have three hypostases who all have that same ousia. Okay, so that was kind of the Greek Orthodox position on that in the early church.
Yeah. So the hypostases, what do they constitute exactly?
So the hypostases, when we talk about the three hypostases, we're talking about the three persons. Okay, so you have three personhoods. Because in the category of, see, with God it's a little bit different, okay? And this is a fallacy on our part that we make when we try and understand God. Sometimes is we try to project onto God our own limitations and say God can't do something because we can't do it, okay? And that's where part of the fallacy lies. That's not the case. I mean, if God exists outside of time and space, then God is more capable than we are, right? Whether we can understand it fully or not doesn't have any bearing upon who God is and how God has defined himself. If this is who God is, in terms of having one ousia and then three hypostases who have that same ousia, thereby making the one God by nature, but three hypostases as persons, that's who God is. That's how he's defined himself to be, and that's how he has always existed. But that's how they would have understood it in the early church in the context of those early councils.
Well, yeah, that's fine. I can grant you distinctions in hypostases, but you aren't claiming that they're the same being. You're not claiming that they are each other. You're saying that they are not each other.
You
So
see,
you're gonna have like
yeah,
three distinct agents.
I know, but this is, you see, the way you phrased it right there and what you said, you made exactly the mistake I was saying, which is you're conflating those two categories with each other. It's the same thing that Muslims do continuously, and why they fail to understand the correlation. You're conflating person with being. Okay, they're two separate categories in the context of how the church separated them out. Okay, the distinction is in the persons, in the sense that we can tell Father, Son, and Spirit apart from each other. But by nature, by essence, it's the one God, since they all have that same nature. In other words, the divine nature of the Father is the same divine nature the Son possesses and the Spirit possesses. That's how they fleshed it out in the early church in terms of the separation between ousia and hypostases.
Yeah, well, I didn't actually get to respond to the other point as well. I'll respond to you and to the other point as well. You said like we can't comprehend God's nature or something else, but you would agree that God is a logical being, right?
Sorry, what?
Would you agree that God is a logical being?
Illogical or logical?
Logical.
Logical in what sense?
That he can find to. Oh, that good for you, bro. You got lots of people.
Guy in the thing who wants to join.
Yeah, so what I'm saying is that logic is like a necessary truth, right? The laws of logic are going to be necessary truths. They're metaphysically bounding. God cannot commit to a contradiction. Would you agree?
Yeah, but it means but in what sense? Like, what point are you trying to get to exactly?
Now I'm just responding to the second part you were talking to, like before you responded to me.
No.
You're saying, well, we try to grasp God, and that's a problem we make.
That's not what I was saying. You misunderstood my point. I didn't say that. What I said is, okay, when it comes to God, you and I both agree that God is beyond time and space, right? So in other words, there's nothing within creation which we can compare God to, right? In some sense, okay? What I'm saying is a fallacy that happens sometimes is that what we tend to do is we apply to God certain limitations that are unique to us as creatures, as limited creatures within time and space. Since God exists outside of time and space, God is more capable in terms of the nature of his existence than we are. Okay, we're very limited and finite. God isn't. Okay, that's the point I was making. I'm just saying it's a fallacy that often occurs when, especially when Muslims try and understand God, they try to place him within a very kind of intellectual box that's in line with the limited understanding that we have of the world around us and the universe around us. I'm saying that that's a fallacy because God exists outside of time and space. Therefore, there's an aspect to God's existence that's incomprehensible.
No, that's actually not. If it's not fallacious at all. So these are like necessary truths.
You don't think God exists outside of time and space and that God is beyond this creation in some sense?
Yeah, but logic isn't bound by time and space.
That's not my question. I'm talking about in terms of placing limitations upon God as a creature, as a limited creature. How can you do that when God is an unlimited being?
No, God is unlimited. Yes, we all agree, but that he's still a logical being. He grounds logic in of himself. So to say that God can commit to a contradiction, that's really bad for you guys. By the way.
That's not my point. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is what you're calling a contradiction in the context of this isn't a contradiction. What I'm saying is you're placing specific limitations upon God. And then because God doesn't meet those specific limitations, you're now saying it's a contradiction. What I'm saying is since God is unlimited, why are you placing limitations upon him in the first place?
No, because contradictions aren't metaphysically possible. Can you... Well, I'll just ask you a question, right? So a contradiction is just P and not P, right? Or X or not X, for example, right? So can something both exist and not exist? Can God exist and not exist?
Okay, but what exactly is your point?
I'm asking you if a contradiction can exist, and just so you know, the law of non-contradiction is a law of logic.
But what exactly is your point with that specific question? What does this have to do with what your argument is in terms of demonstrating that the Quranic God is without contradiction, right? In terms of where that's going to lead to that. Because one of the issues, right, the primary issues between both these scriptures, okay, as far as the Old Testament and the New Testament is concerned, and the Quran is, they're in complete contradiction with each other. Like there's no similitude between either of these scriptures, okay? So you then as a Muslim then have to account for that, okay? How do you as a Muslim account for these discrepancies between both scriptures? So for example, if we stick with the New Testament, Christ is continuously defined as God in the flesh, okay? The Quran does a complete 180 on that and denies it, okay? How do you reconcile both those viewpoints?
Oh yeah, that's fine. I can grant Jesus claims to be God. Now you're gonna have to demonstrate the preservation of the Bible.
Why?
But even then, that's pivoting. I'd like to stick to the Trinity, by the way.
According to your Quran, it was preserved.
Now you're just pivoting to the Islamic dilemma. Well, can't we stay on the Trinity? It's fine. I can talk to you with any topic you'd like, but
Yeah,
I don't
but
like pivoting. So if you'd like, we can
no,
stay on the Trinity.
don't run from the discussion. You brought up the preservation of the text, okay? I'm telling you that your Quran says in chapter 2, verse 89, that the Injeel and the Torah have been preserved. So either you know more than Muhammad, or Muhammad got it wrong. I mean, which is it?
Oh, but let me pull up the verse.
Chapter 2, verse 89. Or I can get it up here for you if you'd like.
Okay, and this
Let me
entails
give-
preservation. How?
One sec. We'll get it up here on the screen so that everyone can see it. 2, 89. Oh, gosh. Okay. So this is what it says, okay? And I'll just read it out. Oh, we have other people. So what I'll do is it okay if we go for, because I want to give the other people a chance to talk as well. If we go for maybe another 5 minutes, 10 minutes, and then I let someone else on, is that okay, sir? And then you can come back next, because we do this every Saturday. So you're welcome to come back and join a little.
Of course. It's your life, bro. It's your life.
It's not that. It's just I want to be fair because there's other people waiting as well, and I want to give them a chance as well. And as I said, you're always welcome to come on, and we do this every Saturday. So let's go for.
Yeah, that's fine. It's fine. You can talk to them, and maybe if I'm still here, you can raise me.
Okay, perfect. So this is what it says. Although they used to pray for victory by means of the prophet over the polytheists, when there came to them a book from Allah which they recognized, confirming, that Arabic word for confirming is musadikan, by the way, which means to bear witness that something is true. The scripture they had in their hands, they rejected it. Okay, so in other words, he's charging them with rejecting the Quran, the same Quran, which according to Muhammad confirms, right, and affirms the veracity of the Torah and the Injeel, right, that the Jews and the Christians in Medina have at that time. Okay, so according to Muhammad's logic, he's saying he's saying that the Quran affirms their veracity of both the Injeel, right, and the Torah that the Jews and the Christians in Medina have, but yet they reject the Quran still, even though it affirms their veracity. Okay, now my issue with that verse is when we look at those scriptures, okay, that verse in and of itself is a contradiction. Okay, it's simply due to the fact that both those scriptures are not affirming anything with each other because they're in total contradiction with each other. So why on earth did Muhammad write that? And what on earth is he talking about?
Yeah, that's fine. We can just go to the exegetes, bro.
I'm just asking you.
Well, the Quran in multiple places, it makes a general confirmation. I can tell you that. Yeah, that's fine. We confirm that these are scriptures by Allah. But we don't make an absolute confirmation and say, yes, these are the same preserved scriptures.
But here's
In
the
multiple
other thing,
places in the Quran, by the way.
this is the other issue, okay? And this is something I've tried to get Muslims to realize as well, okay? Because you look, at least you were honest enough. You're actually more honest than a lot of Muslims Daniel and I speak to, because you were willing to accept that Jesus is consistently portrayed as God in the New Testament, okay? Which, by the way, is the scholarship position, okay? That is the scholarly position, even by atheists and agnostics. And I'm happy that you're honest enough to acknowledge that, because we've actually spoken with some of the big Dawah guys that are deceptive enough not even to make that admission, okay? So you're more honest than they are, okay?
I would just grant it for the sake of the conversation. But that's fine.
Look, if you don't believe it, I can prove it to you if you want. I mean, we can go down that route because I have all the tafsirs, the critical tafsirs on the Bible, and we can go through them. I can prove that to you within.
Oh well, I'm not well versed when it comes to biblical interpretation, whatever. So you'll probably bake me on that.
Okay,
but that's fine. We can continue with the Quran.
Okay, but at least you were on. What I'm giving you credit here. I'm complimenting you. I'm saying at least you were honest enough to acknowledge that. Okay. What I'm saying is, right, if you go down the route and you say, well, they've all been corrupted, okay, everything in the Torah, right, and the Injeel have been corrupted, okay, you then have a big problem because then you can't affirm or prove anything in the Quran. Your proof and your affirmation for everything in the Quran is the Quran itself. So your reasoning becomes circular. So what you're inviting me into is a blind religion where everything is circular. It all goes back to the Quran. In other words, I believe it because the Quran says so. Why is that a sufficient argument? As you know, if you're trying to do dawah as a Muslim to any person, why should anybody buy into that if you can't prove anything the Quran says?
Well, I mean, regarding this verse specifically, because you're really just jumping topics as of now, I can argue the same for the for the like you're just opposing like the issue of circular reasoning when it comes to the Quran. We can just
Yeah.
make an inductive case about the multiple claims the Quran makes in its book that are falsifiable or verifiable, and just raise the probability that whatever the Quran is saying is unlikely or unlikely true, right?
So wait. So are you saying that the Quran for you has contradictions and mistakes, or are you saying it's free from contradictions and mistakes, and there's a logical
No,
way?
that's not what I'm saying. That's not what I'm saying. Is our case is inductive, right? An inductive case just raises the probability that whatever claim X is true, right? So we bring the claims in the Quran that it makes, and which are either falsifiable or verifiable, and build up this case and come
Okay.
to a
So if a
conclusion
claim,
on.
okay, let me build on that. Good point. So if a claim in the
Mhm.
Quran cannot be verified and is completely refuted by every bit of shred of evidence that we have today, what does that mean for the Quran?
Go ahead, bring it on.
No, I'm asking you specifically. What would that mean?
Oh, well, yeah, of course, if it makes a claim and then is false, then the Quran would in turn be false.
Okay, so I'll give you an example. There's a couple of examples we can go through, okay? And I appreciate, by the way, your willingness to do this. But in chapter 61, verse 6 of the Quran, right, Jesus says that a prophet named Ahmed is coming after him, okay? You're probably familiar with that verse. I'm assuming you also know we don't have a single document before the Quran where Jesus says Ahmed is coming after me. So how can that verse be verified?
Yeah, I mean, what does Ahmed mean? First of all,
I'm
you
not
can refer
asking.
to the
I'm asking.
exegetes,
I'm
and
not.
I mean, you can make multiple arguments to whether
Okay.
or not Muhammad is in the Bible.
Okay.
I mean, that's not for me,
I'm
so,
not
to be
saying
honest.
that. I'm not saying that. My question is very specific. Okay. Christ says, according to the Quran, chapter 61, verses, he tells his followers, Ahmed will be coming after me. And he says that exact name, Ahmed will be coming after me. Okay. He tells his followers this. Okay. Is there a shred of evidence before the Quran where Muhammad or where Jesus says, Ahmed is coming after me? Just a general
It
question.
doesn't have to be specifically Ahmed. Like I said, you can
Well,
just
why?
look at
But
the
according to the Quran, it is.
exegetical meaning of Ahmed,
But according to the Quran, it
and then
is.
again, wait,
Look. I'll show you. I'll show you.
wait.
Just to make it simple, okay? So we'll go to 61 verse 6, okay? Because this is
I'm
part
there,
of the issue.
61:6.
This is part of the issue Daniel and I have is that the Quran makes a number of claims, okay? But then when you go and you check the evidence, none of the stuff in the Quran can be verified. So see what he says there. And remember when Jesus, son of Mary, said, "O children of Israel, I am truly Allah's messenger to you, confirming the." Oh, sorry, am I on the right one? Yeah, sorry. Confirming the Torah which came before me and giving good news of a messenger after me whose name will be Ahmed. So he tells them, he qualifies what he means by this. There's a messenger coming after me and his name will be Ahmed. So he tells his followers directly this claim. Then the question becomes, okay, can you provide me with a shred of evidence to back up Jesus saying this? A historical document where Jesus said this to verify this?
Now can I address this?
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, so first of all, we can just take the exegetical meaning of Ahmed. You know, they're both Semitic languages. They both have similar wording, and that's fine. And second of all, why should I grant that everything Jesus said is documented? I can just go ahead and make an argument from silence that the biblical texts aren't as trusted. Not everything was written down. Not every statement that that
No,
Jesus
I know.
said
I know what you're saying. I know
is
where
written
you're
down.
going. Yeah, I know where you're going with this. However, there's an issue, okay? If Jesus said something like this, okay, and Daniel would agree with me on this, right? And I think you would agree with me on some level as well when I explain to you where I'm going with this, okay? That's a monumental claim. If like of all the things to document Jesus saying, if Jesus prophetically told his followers, by the way, guys, there's another messenger who's going to come after me and his name is Ahmed, why would they record all the other stuff and not that, given the gravity of a claim like that?
Well, again, like I told you, you'd
No,
have to
you
argue
went
for
on
the
the great.
preservation of the
You went
Bible, and then you'd have to
on
argue that
that.
everything was written down.
You see, you saw where I was going with that, and you saw the logic behind that, and you saw the rationale. That's why you went straight to the corruption thing as kind of a cop-out
No, I
answer.
already mentioned that before.
Okay,
That's what I've mentioned before.
but the problem is that's refuted by chapter 2, verse 89, according to Muhammad. Okay, but the issue with this particular verse specifically is that
Just
it's
refer
very
to 279, by the
and
way.
the claim is huge, man. I think you'd agree with me. That's a huge claim to tell your followers that another messenger who's called Ahmed will be coming after you. If they were going to record anything, and I'll ask Daniel, if you had followers and you were telling them prophetically another follower or another messenger was to come after you, do you think they'd record that because that's such a big claim, Daniel?
Yeah, absolutely. It's going to be a very critical information that the generations after would be looking after, that somebody named Muhammad or Ahmad is going to come. So that's a very important information. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's kind of the point I was making. Like all the stuff they could record, why not record that? They obviously would have had he said it. The point that I'm making is, since we don't have a single document where he says that, again, going by logic here, it leads me to believe he never said it. Thereby, again, what does that mean? This is obviously not true. He never said it, and if it's not true, this is an invalid verse. Unless you can prove it.
Okay, I'll just repeat my argument again, since you clearly didn't understand it. So I'm asking, right? Since you're using you're using the Bible as the main criterion, yes?
No, I'm not even using the Bible. I'm using documentary evidence. I'm asking you, produce a document where Jesus says Ahmed comes after him.
Yeah, and what's the main document that you guys use? The 4 Gospels, yes?
We have a ton of documents, not just the Gospels, not just the canonical Gospels. I'm saying we have a ton of documents from the 1st, 2nd, 3rd, 4th century, right? All pertaining to Jesus and so-called the alleged words of Jesus. What I'm saying is not one of them has Jesus saying Ahmed's coming after him.
Yeah, so I don't think you'd accept the Gnostic Bibles or any other heretical text, right?
I'm not
so you
saying
just
that.
be using the 4 Gospels or the Eastern Orthodox Bible as the main criterion, yes, as to verify this claim.
I'm saying if there was any document, it doesn't have to be the Gospels. You're not hearing my point. My point is if there's
regardless, you want Christian works. You want Christian works,
no,
yes? You want Christian works.
No. Let me qualify my statement then, okay? If tomorrow they dug up a manuscript and they dated it to 50 AD, it doesn't matter if it's a gospel or not a gospel, and it has Jesus saying Ahmed's coming after me, that changes the whole landscape of this particular verse, because then we can verify it and we can be like, oh my gosh, he actually said that, right? It doesn't matter whether it was in the gospel or not in the gospel. I'm just asking you for a document where Jesus says Ahmed is coming after me before the Quran. Does it exist?
Okay, now can you... I'll answer this, but I need you to answer this, right? Which book do you use as a criterion to falsify or verify this claim? It would obviously be the Bible. I don't know why you're running away from that.
I'm going to answer you. This is my answer. Listen, because I already answered your question. Any document before the Quran that has the words of Jesus, if he says Ahmed is coming after me, is valid for me.
Okay, but what books do you have now that claim that Jesus said X, Y, and Z?
I'm not talking about what books I have now. I'm just saying any document, if you can produce it, I'd be happy with it.
Yeah, and what documents do we have now? Major documents
from the first
that I could use to verify or falsify this claim.
You can't, because there's none of them have this on it.
Yeah, and the major ones that I have are what? The Gospels, yes?
The major ones you would have today would mostly be if we're talking about from the 1st century up until the time of Muhammad. Even though I don't know if you know this, the majority of what's in the Quran is actually taken from Gnostic and apocryphal sources. But anyway, that's a side note.
Yeah, sure, okay.
No, okay. I can show you if you'd like.
Listen, let's not jump topics. You keep jumping from topic to topic. Stay on this, please.
I can show you that. But what I'm saying is, all those documents from the 1st century up until the time of Muhammad are predominantly what we would consider either the canonical stuff or the non-canonical stuff.
Yeah, so you'd use the canonical stuff, yes? I assume.
No.
Direct sayings from Jesus, yes?
You're not hearing what I'm saying. For this claim, I'd use anything. If there was a single document, even from the 2nd century, where Jesus said, Ahmed is coming after me, that would change the landscape of how I view this verse.
Listen, you saying I'd use any document is quite problematic, yes? Because the documents that we do have now are the Gospels, which claim that they are the direct word of Jesus, or they quote Jesus in any way, shape, or form. Now I'm asking you, what's the criterion? You have to be more specific.
I want to see if Daniel understands what I mean by this, because I don't know if you're getting it. Daniel, do you understand what I'm getting at here when I say that any document before the Quran, if Jesus says, whether it's canonical or not canonical, if Jesus says in these exact words, a messenger called Ahmed is coming after me, would be a valid document to verify on some level the veracity of this particular verse? Do you understand what I'm trying to get at here? Or am I not making sense here?
Yeah, I do get it.
Listen, I understand this. I understand
this.
Granting
a very wide berth to produce any document that can be, traced back to Jesus as him being uttering those things.
Exactly. So that's the point I was trying to get across to you, man. It doesn't have to be canonical or non-canonical or whatever. What I'm saying is this verse makes a historical claim. Therefore, what I'm asking from you as historical evidence is a historical document before the Quran. Doesn't matter what shape or form it comes in, that affirms what this verse is saying that Jesus said. That's all I'm saying. And I'm saying it doesn't exist.
Okay, listen. I understand this. You're asking for any document that claims that this is a quote from Jesus, yes?
If you have it, yes.
And what major text do we possess now that claim to be the words of Jesus?
Well, we have quite a
This
few.
is a close question, by the way.
Yeah, no. According to what we have, you have both the canonical stuff and the non-canonical stuff that claim that contain in some shape or form the words of Christ.
So it would be the Gospels generally, yes?
And even the Gnostic Gospels, they claim to be the words of Christ.
Okay, now why should I grant this as a criterion when you cannot muster up an argument for their authenticity?
No, because I'm not going to those documents. I'm just saying any document.
No, but those are the main documents that you do have.
No, but my argument.
Those are the main documents that you do have that claim to be the words of Jesus.
You're glossing over the key part of the argument. The key part of the argument is if his disciples, because remember, this is what all.
Oh wait, give me a second.
So sorry. What I'm going to do is, guys, I'm going to let the next guest up in a second. I'm going to finish this with him, and then I'm going to move on to one of you guys. I'm sorry you guys had to wait so long.
To go for yeah, I have to go for a second. You can rise the other people up, and then I'll rise myself up
And
once
look,
I'm back. Okay.
If we don't get back to this, okay, next Saturday, Daniel and I, every time at 1 p.m., you can come back, okay?
Yeah. Okay. God bless, bro. See ya.
God bless. All the best, man. Take care. Hey, man. How are you?
Yeah, I'm good. How are you?
Sorry for the wait. I know there's another guy waiting as well. I was trying to be fair to you guys, but so are you Muslim? Yeah.
Yeah, can we stick on the topic that you were talking about with him?
This particular verse, is it?
Yeah, so you said that if a prophet prophesies about another person to come, then we'd need some type of historical evidence for this?
No, that wasn't my argument. What my argument was, I'll explain it again because maybe it was a little bit unclear. What I was trying to say is that of all the things, right, because we have so much material from the 1st and 2nd century of what was recorded in relation to the things Jesus said, right? And that comprises all the canonical and non-canonical stuff, okay? What I was saying is that if his followers were to record anything, a claim like this is so monumental and huge, this would be certainly one of the things they would record versus some of the other stuff, right? Because you would agree with me that some things that people say, some claims that people make aren't as big as others. But telling your followers that another messenger is coming after you, whose name is Ahmed, is a very big claim, right? And if they were going to record anything, they'd record that. So the point I was trying to make to the previous guy was, okay, can you give me a shred of evidence where we have a document where Jesus said Ahmed is coming after me?
Okay, this is like an epistemic problem. So it's like, how do you know that such an event happened in the past? And the way that you'd infer that something occurred in the past is through abduction. You wouldn't use deductive arguments. You'd say, oh, we should be able to see such a thing inside of documents. But this just presupposes your worldview, because in our worldview, such texts were corrupted, such texts were lost, similarly to stuff that your church fathers say. So in our paradigm, we wouldn't face this epistemic problem of expecting such a thing because the records were corrupted. But if you are looking at it from a historical point of view as well, then I think you'd still face the same problem. But I think that's irrelevant since we're talking about my paradigm.
Well, look, that doesn't work for a number of reasons, okay? It doesn't work because I'll give you an example, okay? let's move beyond the corruption thing for a moment, because as I said, that's refuted by chapter 2 verse 89. But putting that
I don't
aside
think
for,
so.
well, that's what I just had the text up in front of you guys. You saw it, right?
Can we
The
talk
Arabic
about
word
that?
is the Arabic word is musaddiqan, right? Which means
Okay,
to bear witness as true. Okay,
okay.
so according to Muhammad, right, the Quran bears witness that the Injil. Hold on, I'm getting a call.
All good, all good.
Hold on, just give me 1 second. So basically, right, as I was saying, okay, according to that specific verse, the Quran itself bears witness, okay, that the Torah and the Injil in Medina, in the midst of the Jews and the Christians at that time, are true and authentic. That's what the verb musaddiqan means, okay.
I don't think that
Um,
follows.
well, that's what it says, okay. So look, either you know more than Muhammad, or Muhammad got it wrong. I mean, it's one of those two things, okay.
No,
Now,
can I?
what I'm saying is, wait, let me land home the point, okay? What I'm saying then is, okay, what you've just affirmed with what you said is you're doing the same thing the other guy said, okay? When it's convenient for you and you can't prove something in the Quran, your immediate get out of jail kind of cope answer is, well, they've been corrupted, so it's fine. We'll just go with the Quran because we know everything else has been corrupted. Therefore, what the Quran says is right, regardless of the evidence. That's a very weak argument, right? And then that's also why, by the way, even in scholarship among atheists and agnostics, okay, so I'll give you an example. One of the most forerun, kind of one of the biggest kind of atheists that Muslims like to use within New Testament scholarship is Bart
But
Ehrman, okay, and even Bart Ehrman accepts that Jesus never said this, okay, that this is just made up, okay, and that's the scholarly position on this verse, by the way, by all of academia, okay. So none of them agree that Jesus ever said this, but you're believing it because the Quran says so, even though you know you can't verify it with a shred of evidence. And your get out of jail clause is just, well, everything's been corrupted before, therefore we can't prove anything, even though the Quran actually argues against that position. But that's besides the point. So what do you do with something like that?
okay, that's fine. So, I mean, the answer you gave was twofold. So you invoked some type of external epistemology that I should hold to, which I think is irrelevant. But I want to address
Well, it's called
289.
historical evidence, my friend.
Yeah, we can. I mean, if we use the HCM, then we're not justified in taking the two gospels because of the Q hypothesis that many scholars have posed and said that this is going to be necessary for establishing some parsimony in the historicity. But regardless of that, in 289 we see this confirmation. But I'm just wondering, do you know the context behind it?
289. Oh, chapter 2, verse 89, is it?
Yeah, do you know the context behind this?
Yeah, he's referring to the Jews and the Christians in Medina.
Okay, and the same Jews and the Christians, what did they do in Quran 279?
Let's get it up. You said 279, right?
Yeah.
Hold up.
Adam, I'll be back in 2 minutes.
Yeah, he's talking about their distortion of the scriptures.
Okay, so he says that they distorted these same scriptures, and then in the next verses, well, actually, on the same verse, can you open up something else? Because Ibn Abbas has an exegy of this.
No, hold on. But here's the thing, right? Distort in what sense? Okay.
Yeah, that's what I'm gonna say. That's what I'm gonna show you.
According to Christ, the distortion takes place not in the scriptures themselves in terms of changing the words of the scriptures, but rather it takes place in terms of how they're interpreting the scriptures. Okay. Because, and the reason I bring this up is because 89 doesn't say that. Okay. 89 says, why are you guys rejecting the Quran if it confirms what you guys have? If it affirms that they're true. So
Okay.
wait, hold on. Either 79 is in total contradiction with 89 if we go with what you're saying that it says, okay? Which, by the way, would be the case. If you're saying that he's saying here that they're literally changing the words of the scriptures, then if that's the case, why is the Quran affirming that corrupted scriptures are true, authentic words of Allah? That's a
Okay.
contradiction, okay? So what I'm assuming here in terms of what he's saying is that they're distorting in the sense of the same sense that Jesus accuses them of in the Gospels, which is, again, their interpretation of it. Okay, they have the scriptures there in their midst, the true authentic words of God, but they're not interpreting them properly.
Okay. Your contradiction presupposes like an absolute confirmation of everything. But if I can establish that 279 is talking about textual corruption, which I'm going to give you a hadith after this to show that it does, then we're justified in believing that it doesn't do an absolute confirmation, but it
Okay, but
generally
what's the context then of 89 then?
Yeah, 89 is talking about the same group of people, and it's talking about how I forgot the tribes. Ibn Abbas lists 4 tribes in particular, and these
Mm-hmm.
people they would change their scripture. And if you open up Sahih
89
al-Bukhari,
doesn't say that. You're reading that into 89. 89 doesn't say
it's
that.
the context. It's
No,
279.
no. You're going to 279, but the problem is if we read it in line with what you're reading into it, it then contradicts itself in 89 because 89 is saying that they shouldn't have a problem with the Quran because the Quran affirms the veracity, meaning the truthfulness of the Injeel and the Torah that they have in their hands, in their midst. If that's the
Okay, that's
case,
fine.
yeah, you're also claiming simultaneously they're corrupting them. It doesn't make sense. It's a complete contradiction. You can't have it both ways.
Okay. So if I feel like it's easier if you just pull up the hadith real quick because it'll exemplify my point. Can you pull up
No.
Sahih?
I'm asking you to address before we go there. I'm asking you to address verse 89. Okay.
Yeah, verse 89. Okay, I'll also show you
You
verse
have to.
89. So
You
verse,
can't go to a hadith to try and work around it. I'm asking you 89.
yeah, verse
How do you explain that in light of 79?
verse 89 is what's under contention here. The confirmation in this is what the conclusion of my argument is going to be, or your argument is going to be. That's what we're assessing here. We're assessing, is this an absolute one or is this a general one? So using 89 in what I'm trying to establish is going to be
Okay.
called begging the question.
Let's run with your logic then. Okay. So affirming and confirming as true and verifiable and as authentic in what sense according to 89?
Yeah, in the sense that Ibn Abbas says it's what coordinates with the Quran is going to be true and what doesn't is going to be false in the same verse.
But it doesn't say that. It doesn't
Wait,
say
wait.
that.
Pull up his commentary. Pull up his
You're,
commentary real quick.
I'm not talking about the commentary. I'm talking about what the verse says.
But
Okay.
the problem is you're doing an internal critique, so you're granting us this anyway. You're granting us our exegetes.
But
And even
you're
listen, wait, one more point, Adam. Even if you don't want to grant us our later scholars, Ibn Abbas is the cousin of the Prophet, and in a hadith we have, the Prophet says Ibn Abbas has the best understanding of the Quran. So you have to take it anyway because it's our paradigm.
so Ibn Abbas is divinely inspired then.
Ibn Abbas is given the best understanding, so we're justified in taking his understanding and not
By who?
interpreting
By
it
Allah?
ourselves.
By Allah?
Yeah, Allah could have given him like an ability to actually interpret it properly. I don't
But
see what's wrong
where
with
does
that.
it say that? So in other words, Ibn
Wait,
Abbas
you want
was
the hadith?
no. So in other words, what you're saying is Ibn Abbas acted like a second messenger after
No,
Muhammad
that doesn't
because he was
follow.
also endowed with this special sort of revelatory understanding of the scriptures.
No. This doesn't follow. All that's being said here is Ibn Abbas has the best understanding from the Prophet himself. He said Ibn Abbas is given the best understanding of the Quran in a hadith in Sahih Muslim. Okay, so now we're justified in taking his interpretation over any other interpretation because it's our scripture and it's our paradigm. But if you want to go to the exegete, where he says, there's 2 exegetes. There's one of 279 and there's one of 289. In the one of 289, he refers to the descriptions of the Prophet only, and he says it's in what's concordant with the Quran. The one in 279 is a hadith, it's Sahih Muslim 7363, and he outlines that their scriptures have been corrupted and were justified in taking the Quran over it. So from this, if we read it in
But
context,
the problem with that, and it's the same argument I made to the previous guy, and I don't know if you heard it, right? If you go down that route, right? Because this is the route you have to go down as a Muslim, okay, to try and affirm the Quran. Again, it leads you into this circular form of reasoning, okay? You have to then say all of the Torah and the Injeel, right, is corrupt, right? Because that's the only way my Quran will have a leg to stand on. Because if
that
I
doesn't
claim
follow.
it does follow, because if you claim that any part of the Injil or the Torah, right, is true and authentic, guess what? All of it refutes the Quran. It's a total 180-degree contradiction on the Quran. Therefore, you have to invalidate all of it. And if you invalidate all of it, then you have nothing to prove the Quran by. And if you have nothing to prove the Quran by, then what exactly are you inviting us into apart from a circular religion?
Okay, can I assess this? And I'll assess this by, if you just pull up the tafsir of 289, then it makes this exact
No,
point.
no, no. Answer my question, okay? Answer the question I'm putting
Yeah,
to
I
you.
mean your same question just presupposes an absolute confirmation. If there's wait, can you tell
I'm
me
not
the
even talking about.
contradiction?
I'm not even talking about. I'm not even talking about that. I'm talking about if I grant you the corruption that you're talking about, okay? Even though it
Then you
can't be
concede.
verified, but if I grant you it, okay? The problem then is you have verses in the Quran where it says Muhammad was prophesied in the in the Torah and the Injeel, okay? You have verses which even says the Quran was prophesied in the Bible. Okay, and then this is your get out of jail clause. You'll just say, well, it was all corrupted, therefore we can't prove it. So we'll just take it with a grain of salt that the Quran's saying the truth because the Quran says so, because everything's been corrupted before, right? It's all circular reasoning. It all just goes back to the Quran. You verify the
No
Quran
way,
with the Quran. Okay,
Adam.
that's why
Then
when I ask you with specific issues that the Quran brings up, can these be proven? You just say, well, we don't have the evidence, or your other go-to argument is they've been corrupted, therefore we can't prove it. So you can't, in other words, you can't prove a single verse in the Quran apart from just saying I believe it because the Quran says so.
I don't think that really follows, to be honest.
Okay,
Wait, can you hear me?
Surah Al-Nisa, verse 157. Give me the historical proof for that.
Wait, hello. Wait, my
Yeah.
bad. I think. Yeah. Can
Okay.
I just answer
Okay.
you first, and then we can move on
Let's follow
to
your
it?
logic. Let's follow your logic, because
Can
according
I?
to you, you can give evidence and cases for the claims of the Quran. Okay. I gave one example with 61 verse 6. Your cope mechanism was, well, everything's been corrupted. I can't prove it. All right, fine. Okay. Not one person
Wait,
allegedly
I
wrote.
didn't. That wasn't me. That was another person. That wasn't really me, to be honest.
Okay. Well, do you have a shred of evidence to prove that Jesus said Ahmed is coming after him?
That's just like hermeneutics, and that just concedes a dilemma.
I'm just, it's a basic question. Do you have a single document before the Quran where Jesus said Ahmed is coming after him? It's either a yes or no.
Yeah, Ahmed and Muhammad are co-referential.
Again, I'll ask the question one more time. Do you have a single document that runs along the lines before the Quran where Jesus says what's in chapter 61 verse 6? Do you have it? Yes or no? If you
Yeah,
don't,
he
it's
could have.
okay.
He could have. Wait. That's wait. That's good. He could have said it. The phonemes
Yeah.
could have been there and said it. That's fine. But we don't expect it. This is again. I told you this at the start. We don't expect it, or we shouldn't expect it to be written down. That doesn't follow at all.
Why wouldn't it be written down if it's such a monumental claim?
Yeah, because again, the stuff that we have, or the scriptures that we have right now, which is going to be your gospels, your scriptures, which you guys think is going
I'm
to
not
be
even talking about my
adequate.
gospel, by the
No,
way,
no, no,
but
that's fine. But the adequate stuff that you have is
yeah.
going to be disregarded because we can have a better hypothesis due to the synoptic problem. We can provide you Q, which doesn't contain any of your, it doesn't contain a passion narrative. It doesn't contain some of these deifying statements.
What has this got to do with chapter 61 verse 6? And
Yeah, or
you're
that's, or, no, that just proves that we shouldn't be justified, or we shouldn't expect to see such a thing.
Okay. So let me just summarize. Let me summarize. Okay, so we can go on to Surah Al-Nisa, verse 157. So you are conceding anyway, at least, that currently we don't have a document where Jesus says this, right? Just can we at least agree on that?
It
Currently,
depends what it
you
picks
don't
out.
have one.
Nah, it depends what it picks out.
Dude, come on,
Yeah.
be honest.
Adam, if you allow me, just have a quick question here. So, yeah, hi. So you said that he might have said it, but it is not expected to be written down, right? So just looking at 61:6, if you read through it, he says, "Remember Jesus." So Muhammad is saying, "Remember Jesus." So the context again, who are these people? These people are 6 centuries after Jesus, right?
That's a post hoc fallacy.
Yeah, it's a fallacy in the Quran. Then, who is he
No,
talking
you're
to
saying that.
when 61:6 is saying, "Remember when Jesus said so and so"? Who is he talking to?
Yeah, he's talking to Bani Israel.
Right, so they're coming 6 centuries after the advent of Jesus.
That's an ad hoc fallacy again. My bad.
I
That's
don't know.
a, what's it called? A post hoc fallacy.
So he's speaking to people who came centuries later, and he's saying, "Remember." My question to you is, how were they supposed to remember? By
I
what
remember what?
means? Remember the quote that is saying, 61 verse 6, the first one. "And remember when Jesus, son of Mary, said, O children of Israel, I am truly Allah's messenger to you, confirming the Torah which came before me and giving good news of a messenger after me whose name would be Ahmad." So he's appealing to these people present in his time, Muhammad, and he's saying, "Remember." My question to you is, how would they get to the point of remembrance? Where did they get that information from? It either had to be word of mouth or written down.
Yeah, I don't think that follows at all. When it says
It
remember,
does.
it's just
You're just being denying now.
no,
Denial
no, no,
mode.
Daniel. I'll give you something better. So number
Yeah.
one, you just commit a post hoc fallacy, which is just to say that
Hey,
if something,
dude, it's straightforward questions, okay? If you look, just what Daniel was getting at and what I'm trying to get at is just be honest, okay? Right now, you don't have a document where Jesus said Ahmed is coming after him, correct? Yes or no? If you do, produce it right now. If you don't, it's fine. Just give us, be honest with us, and we can move on to the next thing. Because
dude,
there's no
I mean,
point in us
I
getting
could wait,
dude,
I could grant
there's
you
no
it.
point.
That's fine.
There's no point in us getting hung up on this verse for 2 hours when you know there's not a single document where Jesus said Ahmed is coming after him. Just admit it. You don't have it.
Yeah, I mean, we can make like a prophetic case, but I'll grant you it. I'll grant you it. It's fine.
Okay,
I'll
you
grant
grant
you.
me. Okay, we don't have the document. Thank you. Okay, that's why, from a historian perspective, all historians unanimously agree that this is an ahistorical claim. Anyway, we can move on to the next one. Surah Al-Nisa, verse 157. Can you produce a shred of evidence that Jesus wasn't crucified in line with the kind of orthodox Sunni Muslim position?
You can put
Wait,
it on the
Adam, was
screen.
that it? Was your conclusion just it's ahistorical?
That's the that's academia's conclusion on it.
Wait, but wait, are you familiar with the method they use?
So wait, so now you want to question historians' methodology when it comes to how they try and
That
analyze places of the
that's not
Quran.
what I'm
So
saying.
they're
I'm
wrong,
saying
in other words.
no, that doesn't follow. I'm saying that the historians they use the historical critical method, which is known as the HCM, and they have certain criteria. They have the criteria of dissimilarity, the criteria of embarrassment, etc.,
Yeah.
etc., which they use. They have the criteria of attestation. They use these to establish what happened in the past abductively. And I said this to you when I
Can
first
I?
came.
Do you know? Are you familiar with Bart Ehrman?
Yeah, bottom, and he quotes some
Um,
stuff and does
Yeah,
some.
yeah. Do you know? So according to Bart Ehrman, I just want to hear your take on this because I know Muslims like Bart Ehrman. By the way, let's finish up in the next 5 minutes because I want to give the other guy a chance. Okay, just
Oh,
to be
good, oh,
fair to
good.
him, because he's been waiting for a while. And as I said to the last guy, we're doing this 1 p.m. every Saturday. You're always welcome to come back and we can continue this discussion next Saturday. Okay? Because I like your questions. Your questions are good. But as I said, every Saturday 1 p.m. if you're free, come on. You're always welcome to come on. Okay? Um, but with Bart Ehrman, okay, so according to the Quran, it mentions that Jesus had like 12 disciples, okay? It doesn't mention them by name, but it mentions that he had 12, okay? So my question to you is, do you believe that those disciples were Muslims?
Yeah, the disciples were.
Oh, hold on, just give me 1 second. I'm getting a call. I'll just give me 2 seconds.
I can just speak to like Daniel if he wants to.
Yeah, sure. Go ahead.
Yeah, Daniel, do you agree with what he's saying about Bar Ehrman?
Yeah, like in terms of the crucifixion, right? That's the context he's talking about.
Okay, so can you go to the Apocalyptic Prophet of the New Millennium by Bar Ehrman, page 93, and I'll just read what it says for you.
Yeah, you can read. I don't have it with me.
So he says the earliest Christians put a good deal of effort into convincing non-Christian Jews that the Messiah had to suffer and die, that in fact Jesus' crucifixion was according to the divine plan. But why was it so difficult for them to persuade others? Because prior to the Christian proclamation of Jesus, there was no Jews, as far as we know, who believed that the Messiah was going to be crucified. On the contrary, the Messiah was to be a great and powerful leader who delivered Israel from its oppressive overlords. Christians who wanted to proclaim Jesus as a Messiah would not have invented the notion that he was crucified, because his crucifixion created such a scandal. Indeed, the Apostle Paul calls it the chief stumbling block for Jews. 1 Corinthians 1:23. Where then did the tradition come from? It must have actually happened. So
Yeah.
Bar Ehrman,
Okay.
he says that no early Jews believed that the Messiah was going to be crucified, and that this is a notion that was created by the early Christians. So do you agree with him?
I think first of all, you're jumping topics. You have asserted
Come
that
on.
Jesus could not be the Messiah. That would be completely doing a U-turn on your own Quran and Prophet. So,
No, Daniel,
is
hold on,
that
hold on. He brought up, okay, you brought up Bart Ehrman. Since Bart Ehrman is now an authority for you, Bart Ehrman believes in his video. I don't know if you watched it. You can look it up. It's called Christianity 1 Year After. Bart Ehrman believes that the direct disciples of Jesus believed they'd seen him risen from the dead, and then shortly after, they began to worship him as God. Do you believe that according to what your Quran says about them?
Wait, repeat that. I wasn't listening. My bad.
So you know the way the Quran mentions the disciples of Jesus?
Yep.
Yeah, and you know the way in the Quran they're Muslims, right?
Yep.
Bart Ehrman believes shortly after the crucifixion, they had perceived to have seen him risen from the dead, and then they began to worship him. That's Bart Ehrman's view of Jesus' direct disciples. Do you believe that? Do you agree with him?
Do I believe that the disciples saw Jesus resurrect? No.
According to Bart
Kind
Ehrman,
of.
they did, and then
Wait,
according to
that's
Bart
a
Ehrman,
composition fallacy.
no. You went
Yeah,
with Bart Ehrman and you quoted one of his
come
books
on.
because he's now an authority for you, right? So be
Wait,
consistent. He's either an
Adam,
authority
I have
for
a
you or he's
question.
not. Hold on. Don't quote Bart Ehrman and then say something like, "Oh, like what about this view that Bart Ehrman has? Oh, he's an authority for me because he said this." Be
Wait,
consistent,
Adam.
right? He's either an authority for you or he isn't. So, did the direct disciples of Jesus believe that Jesus was Allah and then start to worship him? Yes or no? Because according to Bart Ehrman, they did.
No, they didn't. Now, can I
Well, Bart
expand
Ehrman,
on the
wait,
point?
so Bart Ehrman's wrong. So Bart Ehrman's wrong.
Yeah, on that front, he's wrong.
Okay. So,
Can I make a
but he's
point?
right on. He's right on the other thing that you want to cherry pick.
Oh, okay. Can I make the point?
Yeah, go ahead, because this is his historical view now, by the way. So be
Yeah,
consistent.
okay.
He's
So
either an
does
authority
it,
for you or he isn't.
Adam, does it follow that if I agree with one thing that Bart Ehrman says, I have to agree with everything?
No, but you're cherry picking.
So it doesn't, wait, I'm not cherry picking because you brought up,
How is
wait,
that not
you,
cherry picking? I just brought up to you one of his historical viewpoints that he bases it off the evidence for him in terms of everything that he knows about Christ as far as the historical Jesus is concerned. And this was his conclusion he came to as far as the earliest disciples of Jesus was concerned. And now you're just going to throw that under the bus and pretend like, well, I'll take the thing over here, but I don't want to take this thing here. That's
okay,
special
wait,
pleading.
that's a good point. Wait, I have a, okay. So you said that because I take someone or I quote someone, it doesn't follow that I have to take everything from them. Now, another question, did I bring up Bart Ehrman or was it you?
No, I brought him up because he's an authority for Muslims. He's not an authority for me.
Wait,
Muslims
an
like to use him.
authority in which, so,
Muslims like to use Bart Ehrman against Christians because you just did it, man. You
no,
proved it. You
Adam, you're
you literally
kind,
had a quote ready from his book,
yeah, that's
Jesus,
fine.
Apocalyptic Prophet of the New Millennium. So you were ready to use him.
Yeah, so Adam,
Don't
this
go
is
backtrack now and pretend like he doesn't exist.
I'm not backtracking. So Adam, you're kind of confused on authority and no authority and how it's being used in this sense. So I'll tell you. When historicity, we don't know if someone's going to be an absolute authority or someone's going to be not an authority at all. We know reliable and unreliable in terms of historicity. Now
Yeah,
we can quote scholars who do works and who do the hypotheses on the historicity of certain events
yeah,
and who make an abductive case for such cases due to evidence and attestation. Just like Dale Allison mentions about Bar Ehrman, he
uh-huh.
says that it doesn't overcome subjectivity. So you're basically this whole conversation, you've been conflating objective history, which you think historicity is absolutely objective, and you think that if I quote one person, this means I take them absolutely for everything. That doesn't follow.
No, that's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is be consistent in how you quote them, okay? Because that is his definitive position on that, okay? Um, just as much as that was his definitive position on the other thing. And then on top of that, when I was bringing you, okay, we'll finish with this and then come back next Saturday and we'll go through some other stuff, okay? But because I have some other stuff I'd like to go through with you. Surah Al-Nisa, verse 157. According to Bart Ehrman, nearly every single critical scholar is in agreement that Christ was crucified, according to his own works on that. Okay? That's his definitive position. He doesn't regard it as conjecture. He regards it as an absolute true historical fact. Again, what's the evidence to the contrary of that affirms the Quranic position when all of academia is regarding this as a historical fact based on the evidence? Are you now going to turn around and just say, well, their methodology is wrong? I guarantee you that's where you're going to go.
Nope. Well, the historical method, that's fine. The Quran doesn't affirm that we'd see historical evidence of Jesus not being crucified. It says we'd expect to see historical evidence of him being crucified.
No, but the Quran says that he wasn't. Okay, so what I'm saying is,
That's a metaphysical claim.
okay, but where's the evidence he wasn't crucified?
Yeah, we don't expect historical evidence for a metaphysical claim.
Okay, let me ask Daniel. Daniel, if a ton of Jesus's followers, right, during that time didn't see Jesus, okay, let's say they knew that he survived the crucifixion and he hadn't been crucified, do you think, Daniel, they would have reported that in some shape or form?
Yeah, of course. It
Yeah,
follows.
exactly. That's my point.
Wait,
Where's the
Adam, can I
report?
prove my point real
Where's
quick?
where's the historical reports of followers of Jesus going around saying he hadn't been crucified? This was
Wait,
just
the followers did say that.
this was a divine feat that Allah performed to deceive the people. Which, by the way, we can get into the consequence of that, which is that Allah led to 500 years of what's called apostasy, with people worshiping Christ because of what he did on the cross. Right, so your God essentially led to the condemnation of about 500 years worth of people
That's a red
because of what
herring.
he did. Okay, that's literally what happened. Okay, because
Okay, Adam,
after
can
his
I assess
death
what you
and
said?
resurrection, they came to believe he was God.
Okay, Adam. So the disciples or any people who witnessed the crucifixion, they would come to the conclusion that he was crucified based off of observation, correct?
Not according to the Quran and the Hadith.
So when you see an event, you don't observe it?
According to the Quran and according to the Hadith, right? So, for example, Ibn Kathir's tafsir on Surah Al-Nisa, verse 157, what does he say?
Ibn Kathir on Surah Al-Nisa 157. Go on.
According
I'll pull out.
according to Ibn Kathir, okay, Jesus went into his disciples before his crucifixion, okay, and told them, which one of you will take my place? And then one of his disciples said, I'll do it, Lord, I'll do it. And then Jesus made the disciple look like him, and he made himself look like the disciple. And it was the disciple that ended up being crucified on the cross. Okay? That's what Ibn Kathir says. Okay? So
Yeah,
they were
that's a
cognizant, according to Ibn Kathir, they were cognizant, historically speaking, beforehand that this was about to happen and this was Allah's plan. Okay? What I'm saying is, where are the reports of this if he told his followers before and they were totally aware that this was going to happen because he'd prepped them beforehand? Where's the historical evidence for that?
Yeah, okay, that's nice. So Ibn Kathir gets this from Ibn Abbas, and Ibn Abbas quotes this as a hypothetical. He says this is one of the things that could have happened. He doesn't state it deductively. And this Ibn Kathir actually mentions and expands on this in Al-Bidayah wa Nihaya in one of his books. So it's not 100% sure that this has happened. This is a possibility of what would have happened. And
Yeah.
now with my line of reasoning, but you don't want to answer my question, so I'll just get to the conclusion straight away. If how we know an event happened is due to the way that we observe it, and the Quranic author says that it was made to appear so, then those observing it would come to the conclusion that crucifixion happened. Therefore, we're not justified in see, or we shouldn't expect to see historical evidence of him not being crucified.
That's not my point. My point is, if his followers knew that he hadn't been crucified because he'd prepped them beforehand, where's the reports of that? Right?
Again,
Because
that's just
no,
a wait,
hold
that's just a
on,
narration that he's relaying.
no. Hold on. I'm not even talking about a narration. I'm talking about according to the Quran. Doesn't it say that the followers of Jesus were strengthened? Okay, and they had
Yeah, it
victory
does, it
over
does.
they had victory
That's
over who?
irrelevant though.
Okay, but where's the evidence of that? Where's the evidence of these Muslims after Jesus and after the crucifixion? Because the
Yeah,
Quran says
so
they existed.
historical evidence?
Yeah, historical evidence. Are you going to tell me
Okay,
they were
wait,
all
you know
wiped
what?
out?
Wait, I'll give you something cool. Go to Galatians 3:1 real quick.
No, I'm asking for evidence for this first. Can you provide evidence for it?
Yeah, go
Forget
to Galatians 3. Yeah, that I'm giving you evidence.
you
Go to
said the scriptures have been corrupted. I'm not going to go to a corrupt scripture according to your logic to prove anything. Prove to me
Wait,
with
that
documented
doesn't follow.
evidence.
Wait, you take wait, no. So now you're asking for
I'm
evidence from a
asking you for
historical.
evidence of.
Can I
I'm
speak,
asking
please?
for evidence of
Just two
these
seconds.
Muslims.
Yeah, just
Okay,
2 seconds,
you
please.
have it.
Just okay. So you're asking for evidence, not insofar as my paradigm. You're asking for evidence insofar as historicity. So don't conflate the two and don't say that oh it's corrupted. You're asking for evidence that historians would use, and you're asking for stuff outside of my paradigm. So now I'm going to give you stuff
You don't
outside
have
of
it.
my paradigm.
Okay. Hold on. Like the chapter 61 verse 6 thing, you're also conceding when it comes to that you don't have any evidence for it.
Yeah, okay, sure. From a historical lens, that's fine.
You see, this is my major issue with the Quran, okay? And I've only given you two examples of this. Okay, we can go through more, and I'm hoping you're going to see the logic of this as we go through them each week, okay? But the point I was trying to get across to you is that the Quran, in a number of places, makes very, very specific historical claims, okay, with certain things. I didn't even go to the drowning of Pharaoh in chapter 10, verse 90, okay? Which, by the way, is rejected by Egyptologists, okay? Because none of the pharaohs from the 18th and 19th dynastic period drowned, but the Quran says that he drowned, okay? And that's been proven because we have his body because it was mummified, okay? So, in other words, forensics have analyzed the body and they see he wasn't crucified, or he didn't drown. So like this is what I'm saying. Whenever I ask you guys for evidence for anything in the Quran, it's just convenient of you guys to say, well, why are you expecting, that kind of evidence? Why are you expecting that sort of expectation of the Quran? Like it's just a throwaway cope mechanism every single time you're asked to produce something that verifies anything your Quran says. Because again,
Can
you're saying that you agree with the Quran and you believe the Quran because the Quran says so, in spite of the lack of evidence that you have today.
Yeah, that's fine. Can you like deductively establish anything from your Bible?
Oh, of course.
Deductively?
Yeah, no. Okay, the crucifixion of Jesus, it's widely accepted. I don't have to prove it. It's widely accepted within academia.
Is the
By all of
crucifixion
historians,
deductive?
by all of academics and historians, okay? I don't even have to prove it. Okay? It's literally it's an established fact throughout all of academia. Okay?
Wait, Adam, is it deductive?
In what sense?
So
What exactly is the sort of evidence you'd be looking for that? Like
meaning
what would
can
be
you
your go-to approach?
do you come to that conclusion based off of what is the best explanation for these events, or do you come to that conclusion based off of reasoning alone?
It's a mixture of all these things. That's how they
So
do
it's
it. That's how
that
historians do it.
that
No,
doesn't
they
work.
analyze all the evidence, okay, and then they come to the best understanding they can based on the evidence they have in front of them. Okay? So when it comes to the crucifixion, it's the same thing. This is the best understanding they can come to with all the evidence that they have, and then their conclusion is historical fact. Okay? And
Yeah, but
it's not just with
then
the
again,
crucifixion. It's not
okay,
just with the
that's
crucifixion, it's with other stuff as well.
can a
Okay?
historical fact be subjective?
If something happens historically speaking, what on earth are you talking about? Can it be subjective?
Because you're
As in,
saying it's a
whereas
historical
scholars
fact,
want you to
meaning that
interpret his crucifixion in a specific way. Is that what you're trying to say?
no. I'm just because you're very confused on like how we interpret history. Is it so you said that it's a historical fact, meaning it's deductive, and we come to this.
Okay.
So
Let's
a historical
let's
fact, is it objective or subjective?
let's finish with this. Okay. When it comes to historical events, if we have clear historical data, right, that tells us with certainty that something happened, okay, so much so that a historian will sit there and say that's a historical fact. Okay, in their mind, do you think they're thinking it's just something merely subjective, or do you think they're thinking that this is actually an established thing that happened when they are coming out with a claim like that in their credible works that they write? So, for
Yeah, no,
example,
they think it's subjective.
exactly, okay, and that's based on what?
Because they come to this conclusion based off of their own research and principles, hence they think it's subjective and unestablished fact.
Yeah, that's exactly my point. Okay, and it's not. And the problem with the Quran is you can't do that with the Quran. With a number of things the Quran says, you literally have to run to. Okay, they're all wrong. Their methodology is wrong. They're going about it the wrong way. Ultimately speaking, we go with the Quran because things can't really be verified in the sense that people think they can. Therefore, yada yada yada. It's just again, it's flowery language just to go back to circular reasoning. Okay.
Yeah, wait,
Uh,
Adam, just before you go, can we go to one verse just real quick?
in the Quran.
In Galatians.
Why do you want to go to a corrupted scripture?
Yeah,
You
because
said
you
it was
said
corrupt.
wait, no, but because you mentioned the consensus, so I want to correct you there.
On what?
Yeah, on the crucifixion.
Oh, you want to talk about when Paul is dealing with Gnostics, is it?
Yeah, just
Wait,
can you just pull up real quick?
wait, hold on. So your affirmation for Surah Al-Nisa verse 157 are the Gnostics who believe Jesus was so divine he didn't have
No,
a
that
physical
doesn't
body.
follow.
But dude, that's what the Gnostics
No,
believed.
wait, I'm correcting you when you said that every single person thought is crucified.
No, the Gnostics didn't.
Okay, so
But the
not every
Gnostics
single
weren't
person
also.
believed he was
No,
crucified.
in the context of this verse, I'm talking about the people who interpreted it in this way, right? Who knew, for example, that Christ wasn't crucified in the sense the Quran is saying. Okay, I'm saying where is the evidence for those people? I
So
know
for some
Gnostics.
things you need evidence, for others you don't.
No, what
Like
I'm saying.
this.
Okay, let me. I'll conclude with this, and then we can pick it up next week. Okay.
Yeah, no worries, no worries.
Um, Basically, and I've argued this before in my previous streams. Okay, I believe I believe that the Quran and Muhammad took this from Basilides. Okay, this view of substitution. Okay, because in Irenaeus's work against heresies, in the first book of that, I think it's chapter 24, he talks about the heresy of Basilides, who was a Gnostic, by the way. This was the Gnostic position. I don't know if you're aware. Okay, they believed that Jesus was so divine and so holy. that he couldn't have a physical body. That's why they denied the crucifixion. But they're not Muslims, because you would agree with me that that view of Jesus is a heretical one. Okay, that's a total heretical view, because they're associating with Allah a partner who's so divine and holy he can't have a physical body. Okay, so that was their logic behind justifying him not being crucified. Okay, it was an invention that they came up with as a commitment to this theology that they'd introduced, right? That does not on any level affirm Surah Al-Nisa verse 157. You have to find people who are in line with Surah Al-Nisa verse 157 that affirm it in the way that it's talking about, not running to Gnostics who have a totally different viewpoint.
Yeah, we'll pick this up maybe next week if you're free.
Yeah, so, as I said, man, Saturday 1 p.m. Daniel and I will be doing this weekly, and you're always free to come on, okay? And
Alright.
look into the stuff, and I have some other stuff I want to bring up with you next week, okay?
All right. I appreciate it. Thanks for being respectful, by the way.
Okay, no worries. No, you were great, man. You were great. Thank you so much.
All right, I appreciate it. All right, bye. Have a good day.
Take care. All the best. Bye bye. Okay. I need to go soon, Daniel. So we have one last guy here. I can bring him on for maybe 5-10 minutes, but if I bring him on, Daniel, do you want to continue with him? But if you continue with him, can you end the stream then while I'm gone?
I'll be going as well. I
Now, is
stressed you on the time, yeah.
Okay. To the guy that's there, I'm so sorry. We have to go now. We're finishing.
You can
up.
time it, maybe just like 10 minutes or so, and then we can.
We'll do 5 minutes. We'll give him 5 minutes.
Yeah.
Hey, man.
Okay. Yeah, 5 minutes is fine. What's up?
I'm so sorry. We literally do have to go now. But next week we do 1 p.m. Okay, on Saturdays. It's Irish time, so always feel free to come on whatever, and we can have longer. Next time if you just show up a little earlier, okay?
Sure.
So go. Are you Muslim, right?
Yes.
Try and just ask maybe 1 or 2 quick questions, and we'll answer them before we go, if we can, if time permits.
I just want to talk about the Trinity. If the persons have indexical knowledge.
Sorry, go ahead. Yeah.
Yeah, like do the persons know that they're?
You want to go to Mark 13, is it?
No, I said about indexical knowledge.
Okay, so
Do you know what that is?
So what's your point?
Yeah, like the persons will know that the persons know that they're themselves, but they also know that they're not the other persons. So therefore, each of the persons have their own mind. Yeah, so that it says that there's not only one mind in the Trinity, but that there's 3 minds.
Okay, so what's your question then?
Yeah, the persons have indexical knowledge.
Okay, so in the context of consciousness, okay, the Son. Okay, this is how I would explain it to you. Okay, the Son knows that he's the Son. Okay, the Father knows that he's the Father, and the Spirit knows that he's the Father, and they can have personal relationships with each other because they're distinct persons. But that would be the limit of my understanding on that.
Wait, does the Father know that he's? Wait, you said the Spirit knows that he's the Father?
So the Father knows that he is the Father. The Son knows that he's the Son. The Spirit knows that he's the Son. They're distinct from each other, and they can have personal relationships with each other because they're distinct persons. But again,
the Spirit knows that he's the Son?
What's that?
You say that correctly? You said that the Spirit knows that he's the Son.
No. I said the Son knows that he's the Son. The Spirit knows that he's the Spirit. And the Father knows that he's the Father. So they have awareness of who they are themselves, distinct persons, and then they can have personal relationships with one another.
Yeah, would you say that the Son knows that he's not the Father, and that the Father knows that he's not the Son?
Yeah, of course. That's where the distinction lies.
Yeah, tell me how this doesn't lead to 2 individual consciousness.
But as far as self-awareness is concerned, right, they have consciousness insofar that they know who they are and they can operate in a personal sense with one another. Again, this is the limit of how it's been expressed in history, okay?
Yeah, but don't you see how this leads to multiple minds? Like if the Father knows that he's not the Son, and the Son knows that he's not the Father.
No, you're talking about consciousness. So in the sense of consciousness, as I said,
yes,
he knows who he is as the Son. The Father knows who he is as the Father. The Spirit knows who he is as the Spirit, and they can have personal relationships with each other. You don't need to overcomplicate it beyond that. That's literally what it is. Okay.
Okay. Does the Son know that he's not the Father? Is that a part of his mind, of his intellect?
As a self-aware person, yes.
Okay, so let's say a proposition, like the proposition will be, I am not the Father, right? Will the person of the Father also hold that proposition?
Yeah, he knows that he's not the Son, of course. There's a distinction. They know.
No,
They're aware. They
no.
have awareness.
No, the proposition was, I know that I'm not the Father, right? The Son holds this proposition, and the Spirit also holds this proposition.
Yeah.
Does
he
the
knows-
Father hold this proposition?
Of course.
No, the proposition is, I know that I'm not the Father. Does the Father know that he's not the Father?
No, the Father is the Father. He knows that he's the Father.
Okay, so then the Father doesn't hold the proposition which the Son holds. So then there's a difference in propositions that's believed in.
No. You're talking about distinct persons. That's the distinction in the persons. You're conflating categories here. The distinction in the persons is they're aware of who they are as who they are. Okay, so the Son knows that he's the Son. The Father knows he's the Father. The Spirit knows.
Yeah, but you agreed with me that they also have knowledge of that they aren't the other persons. That's also a part of their consciousness.
They have awareness of it. But what's the question? Like, what's the overarching question here?
There's like you can tell. Wait, I can say the conclusion. There's not
sorry.
an overarching question.
What's the
The conclusion is that the persons have individual minds, individual centers of consciousness, that they hold differing propositions of intellect.
But consciousness, in the context of what we're talking about, right? This sort of self-awareness, okay, is a category of person, okay. Like again, you're conflating the see, what you're doing is you're conflating the category of being with the category of person, okay, which is not representative of Trinitarian thought. That's a misrepresentation of Trinitarian thought.
No, okay? Because you agreed with me. Like, okay, we're going in circles at this point. I think we can just talk about this next week.
But before you go, as I said, okay, the Trinitarian understanding, I'll just explain it one last time, okay, as I explained to the previous guest, okay. You have, okay, this is the belief, okay, you said you're a Muslim, right?
Yes.
So basically, the Trinitarian viewpoint is that you have one being of God, one ousia, okay, one substance, one divine nature, okay, that the Father possesses, the Son possesses, and the Spirit possesses, okay, but they are three distinct persons, okay, but because they all possess the same divine nature, they're one God by nature or by essence or by substance, okay. But what you need to do in the meantime between now and next week is you need to look into, okay, how do they categorize being and person, right? What's the aspects or the properties of these characteristics or these categories, that differ from each other, okay? Because what Muslims tend to do is they tend to apply to one category the properties that should only be applied to the other category, okay? And that's one of the fallacies where they get it wrong. They start conflating the two with each other, okay? Because it's in what's called in Islam with Tawhid, it's totally different, okay? The way that you guys understand the properties and the aspects of God is quite different from how we understand them, okay? So to understand that better, you need to look into those two separate categories and how they're distinct from each other, okay? And then we can pick it up next week, okay? So look into that between now and next week, and then we can go through it next week. And I can help explain to you the separation between the two in terms of how we distinguish those two categories from each other, and then how they correlate in the context of the Trinity. Is that fair enough?
Yeah.
Is there any other quick question you have, or is that it?
Can the persons hold essential properties, which are not a part of the divine essence?
So give me an example.
Yeah. Okay. So let's say there's a property which, let's say, is essential to the person, but is not essential to the divine essence. Is that possible or no?
Like what? Like you'd have to give an example. Like, because I want to see where you're going. I want to see exactly where you're going with this.
Okay. So let's say begetting the Son. Will it be essential for the Father to beget the Son?
In the context of what's specific to the Father as the Father, in terms of how he functions as the Father, that is something that's specific and unique to the Father.
No, that's not the question. Ask if it's essential.
It's essential in what sense? That he has to do it?
Yeah. It's part of the essence of the Father to do this.
God doesn't have to do anything. The point with the Trinity is that this is how God has defined himself. Okay? If God has revealed himself in this way, this is who God is. So when you go back
to... Okay, you can just say that it's not essential then.
No. What I'm saying is, when you go back to, and this is something else you need to look at, okay? In Exodus 3:14, when God says, "I am that I am," okay, or "I will be what I will be," right? If this is who God is, and this is who God has defined Himself to be, that's it. That's all there is to it. If God has stated, "I am the one God, but I have eternally existed as Father, Son, and Spirit," that's God's own definition of Himself. Okay, you don't need to overcomplicate it beyond that. Okay, because by the way, just for context here, okay, there's a book by one of your Muslim authors, okay, he did a book on Tawhid. It's a very short book. I can't remember his name. I have it on my shelf there. But like,
Double Tawheed.
yeah. But when
I
he
think
goes
that's by
into,
Muhammad ibn Abdul Wahhab.
yeah, that's the one, right? But when I went through that, he doesn't go into all the stuff you guys are talking about now. He's not overcomplicating it like that. Okay, as I said, if God defines Himself in a specific way, that's what it is. Okay, now we can try and make sense of certain things, but we don't need to overcomplicate it either. Okay, because there's certain things that, and I applied this to the last guy as well, the very first guest that we had. You can't project onto God certain, because this is part of your paradigm. I'm not blaming you for it. It's just part of the Islamic paradigm. You have to place God within a very specific intellectual box. Okay, and for you, if God doesn't fit within that intellectual box, He can't be God anymore. But that's a human limitation you've placed upon God, right? Who am I as a finite creature to place God, who is infinite, within a finite box, that a finite understanding of what God is? It doesn't make sense. There's a reason why, for example, in the Old Testament, we have verses in Isaiah like, "His ways are not our ways, His understanding is not our understanding, He's far above," all this kind of stuff, okay? There is, to a degree, within the capacity of our own mind, an ability to understand God through His revelation, through how He's made Himself known. But there's certain aspects of God's existence that you're never going to understand. Like, I'll give you an example. I'll give you one example, okay? When we say God is omnipresent, okay, I don't know what that means. Nobody knows what that means. We just know it has something to do with the fact that His presence can be felt in some sense everywhere, right? But in terms of what that actually means, I don't know, because I've never experienced it. That's only something that's unique to God. But if you're asking me for an absolute definition as to what that means, I don't know, because I've never experienced it myself. To truly understand something, you'd have to experience it for yourself. Since that's a separation category between God's divinity and my finite nature, I can't give you a concrete definition for it. Okay, so we have to concede at points. There's a certain limitation to the things we can understand. Okay, and you would apply the same thing to Allah, for example, with certain aspects of Allah's existence, which, by the way, we'll get into next week. Okay, so bring the questions on the Trinity, and then I'm going to bring some questions on Allah and Tawhid. Okay,
Sure.
is that fair?
Yeah, sure, we can do that.
Okay, so as I said, 1 p.m. Okay.
Yep. All right. Have a nice day then.
Okay, have a nice day, man. Take care. All the best. Okay. Good. We had some decent traction today. Oh, you have to go, Daniel, right?
Yeah, I'm gonna be going now. Yeah.
Okay. That was good. That was really, really good.
Yeah, very good. Yeah, at least some communication, conversation. It's really good.
The only shame about it is the 1 week people come, I'm actually sick. But
we'll come back probably next week.
But yeah, next week I'll be healthy, hopefully, God willing. And yeah, we'll pick it up next week. And thank you so much for the guests who came on. Again, you guys were cordial. You were good to have discussions with. And yeah, it was a good stream. And I look forward to you guys coming back next week. And until then, God bless and the very best to all of you.
Indeed. Amen. God bless.